Hey, beautiful creatures. I'm Amithia, your curator of deliciously dark pages. I'm so happy you are here. We are in the final video of catching up on the year's reads. If you missed it, I was displaced for the first half of the year, so I took a big break from recording and I'm back. Woo! So today we are going to be going through June, July, so that we're all caught up and on the same page. I'm so excited because I read some of my favorite books in these months. Oh my goddess. And I got introduced to new authors. There's so much to tell you. Obsessed. Anyway, to start off in June. Oh my goodness, so long ago. We're literally in October. Anyway, in June, I reread The Blackwood Institute by J. Rose. This is one of my favorite series of all times. In fact, I may do a tier ranking of all my favorite series soon, and it will be on there. Stay tuned to find out where. Anyway, The Blackwood Institute follows Brooke, Eli, Phoenix, Hudson, and Cade, who have been a insane prison, basically. Well, the idea is that they go through this recovery program, and in the end, they'll be like wiped of their crimes, and they can be reintegrated into society. However, this place is unsafe AF. And so we have Brooklyn, who is our main girl, and she has schizophrenia. She may or may not have murdered somebody, and she is so closed off as she enters this space because her plan is to herself by the anniversary of the crime she may or may not have committed, because it feeds into her schizophrenia, and that's just unbearable for her. And so she doesn't want to get close to anybody. She isn't interested in anybody getting close to her. She isn't engaging with any of the recovery process. And you kind of get hints at how invasive the recovery program is, in the sense that all their time is scripted, all their meds are controlled by somebody else. They have these strange psychological therapy sessions. And there's just something nefarious going on with the different things that people are allowed to get away with within the institution. Like, there's kind of like a mini society in the institution of people like making drugs available, making weapons available, making contraband available. There's like people who can pull favors with management to get like movies and strange equipment and da-da-da. There's something strange going on in this institution. It doesn't quite run as you would expect a recovery institution to run. Now, rest of the cast characters, because Brooklyn is just there to and leave, right? That's heartbreaking as it is, but also you see her suffering. You can kind of understand where she's coming from, as much as you're like, girl, hang in there, you know? And then we have Eli, who is a guy who is mute, and he experiences the world as smells. So, for example, he might experience arguments as like acrid lemon that just overtakes his entire body. And so existing, really difficult for him, really, really difficult. You have Phoenix, who is a paramaniac with bipolar, who also has drug issues and addiction issues. Sorry, Mike. And he's a bit of a wild card. He's incredibly mischievous, incredibly playful. Eli, he communicates so much with his looks and with writing occasionally, and he's so, like, the word equivalent of pungent. He's so poignant with what he says. He cuts to the bone and is very astute. But Eli is so dark and so moody and so misunderstood because most people don't take the time to get to know him. I'm getting distracted. I adore Eli. Anyway, so we have Phoenix. We have Hudson, who is a brother of Cade. Hudson is somebody with, textbook anger management issues, maybe even antisocial personality disorder to a degree. And he did something incredibly violent that got him committed to this space. And he is your textbook controlling, possessive, you are mine, you've always been mine, you will never escape me kind of person. Oh, do you love it or do you hate it? I think it depends where you are in the series, because in some ways it's disgusting and harmful, and in other ways it's the only thing that brings Brooklyn back from the edge. So, you know, read it and find out. And then we have Cade, who may have OCD. Nothing's diagnosed, I don't think, but and he is kind of the protector of the group, who's just determined to keep everybody in the crew together so that they can help save each other and get each other out of this institution, just kind of get through the next few years so that they can get through the recovery program and be released back into society and build the lives they actually want to build, right? There's also so much that goes on in this series. You have dodgy institutions, you have family dynamics that try and ruin everybody, you have like drug cartels, you have people on the run. So much happens in this 3-book series. It's wild. It's a fucking page turner. I can never put it down even when I read it. I think I've read this series maybe 2 times all the way through and many times like partially of the way through. And like there is spice in this, there is polyamory, there is sword crossing, there is kind of taboo and kink in there as well, in the sense that obviously in such distressing situations there are things like self-harm, there are sexualization of blood fetchers, that kind of stuff. So please read your trigger warnings and keep yourself safe. But this series is phenomenal in that the pacing is groundbreaking. Like you will never be bored. And if you're like, how could this possibly get worse? I promise you it can get worse. J Rose is one of those with this series particularly. Every character is so well written. Like every storyline complements the character and makes sense for who they are as people. Even the character development. Some people have to be dragged by their freaking teeth to progress as people, right? And the consequences that happen to this group. Oh my goddess, I just want them to be well and safe and whole. Goddess. But I adore them. I adore Brooke with every fiber of my being. She is a fighter, like the definition of a fighter. And then later we have Seven introduced. Oh my goddess, so broken. So broken. Anyway, I adore every single one of these characters. I adore seeing them get through stuff. I adore the strength that they pull from each other and within themselves and how they grow as people. And oh, the found family. Oh, one of my favorite series of all times. I'm attempting to get through J Rose's backlist. And so far, I think it's just been the wrong time for like my mood and what I've been through. Like she writes, from what I've seen, very sad stories. Her standalones anyway seem quite sad. And then I read another one of her trilogies, which we'll get to in good time. But I'm trying to get through the backlist bit by bit. Next, I read Charming the Devil, which is a kind of Dorian Gray retelling where you have Baz and Dorian. Baz may be the original Basil reincarnated as a female witch who loves liminal spaces. And I adore seeing that witchcraft representation because it's similar to my own craft. So woo! But anyway, back to the point of the story, which is Baz and Dorian. Dorian's painting is slowly disintegrating with time, and he's like, shit, I don't want to be mortal, I've got to solve this. Baz has a form of magic that she's been conditioned by her parents never to use because a tragedy happened and there were dire consequences to her using her power. And so she's like, I refuse to ever use my power ever. And so the story is kind of Dorian and her maybe having a romance, but trying to convince Baz to use her power to soothe his painting. And then you also have a background thing of gods being reawakened and supernatural societies being formed to kind of remodel the earth. And you have other classical characters arising throughout the series, and you really see the effects of immortality on one's ethics and how you can even get Dorian to see people as people, and kind of that emotional closed offness that is maybe a natural consequence of immortality. And you see Baz going through like reckoning with who she is as a person, reckoning with the wrongs she did and how she can live with that, reckoning with the responsibility of a power such as hers, reckoning with her as an artist and how art is expression and how she kind of represents that, and just how much agency she feels she has over her life. So there's so much depth to this story actually, but it's written rather simply, so it's really, really easy to follow. I personally found that a bit damning because it means I don't want to continue with the series. I think it is gearing up to be a series. I think the next one is like a retelling of The Great Gatsby essentially. But yeah, so it was a simple read. It had elements I really, really loved. It had elements I really want more of, like the way magic was represented was actually pretty accurate and really, really cool. I just wanted more. I was tempted to keep it in my library just because I've never come across a depiction of a witch using magic involving liminal spaces, and it's such a core component of my craft that I was like, oh my goddess, yay representation. But inevitably it's not something I'm going to reread because for me the writing style was just too simple. The themes of supernatural uprisings bored me a little bit. It veers into that fantasy component that's just going to end in war. And we don't even do that well in the human realm, so I'm just not here for it. So for me, not going to continue the series, but it really was an enjoyable read, and I did gift it to a friend of mine so that she can have like a little bath treat time with it because it was easy to read. It was kind of feel good in that sense, which is really cool. And obviously it dealt with themes of mortality, so just be ready for that. Next, I read J Rose's Saber Security trilogy. I mentioned before, trying to get through the backlist. So I read Corpse Roads, Skeletal Hearts, and whatever the third one was. I'll put them below. It was difficult, but let me tell you what it's about. We follow Harlow, Enzo, Theo, Hunter, and Lee. Harlow is somebody who was taken captive when she was a young child and experienced horrific trauma from a delusional man her entire childhood. So we kind of follow Harlow breaking free with immense bravery, immense grit, immense resilience, and dealing with like survivor's guilt, dealing with feeling like she was a part of the harm that was done, dealing with that mental manipulation, that brainwashing kind of, and the impact of that, dealing with the media suspecting and painting her as a villain and turning against her, and also trying to trust the skills of cybersecurity, the guys, to keep her safe from this guy who just is a menace to the entire nation by the end of the novel. And so Harlow is strong in a very, very different way to Brooke from Blackwood Institute. Harlow is strong in that she values her empathy so highly, she values compassion so highly, and she is determined to keep her softness as a form of strength throughout the whole book. So she's such a different heroine, such a different version of strength. And I continued reading the series to follow her journey because I was so invested in seeing her grow and carve out peace for herself and build a life for herself and reclaim who she was and decide who she is now. So invested in that. Let me tell you a little bit about the guys surrounding her though. So we have Enzo, who is a big, burly bodyguard who's incredibly skilled and one of the heads of cybersecurity. So he trains people, he makes sure he kind of almost has a pseudo military position in keeping cybersecurity running. And he is a very soft person. He's very gentle with Harlow, but he's very commanding and authoritative and is the first to make a decision on behalf of somebody if it's to do with their protection and security. So big, like Papa Bear kind of vibes. Safety comes first. Then we have Theo, who is kind of reclusive, kind of heartbroken because with a past agent who didn't meet a good ending. And so they're all dealing with the kind of the grief of that. And that I think contributes to them making some crap decisions regarding Hollow's safety. But anyway, Theo visibly struggles with this grief the most, struggling with letting go, struggling with moving forward, struggling like feeling like he's betraying a memory, all this kind of stuff. And then he's also got this background thing of him being a hacker and being so ready to walk away from all of the disgusting crimes he's seen and helped come to safety. But from this very like background approach of keeping that distance, of using his skills as a brilliant, brilliant hacker, kind of seeing his mental health dip and dive throughout that process and what this work takes from him. So Theo is very smart. He's very guarded. You learn about him very, very slowly and has so many layers and depth. He's adorable. And he's also got a submissive streak. So that plays out in the books and you kind of see that develop. And that's a little bit different because we don't see that super much in the dark romance genre of the guys having submissive streaks to women, which is beautiful. Great BDSM representation, actually. Very beginner friendly, actually, I would say. Then we have Hunter, who is the head of cybersecurity. He is no nonsense. He is authoritative. He is cold and businesslike to people who don't know him well. He's really hard to get to know. And he has the typical kind of like suave secret agent kind of style to him. He's a force to be reckoned with, highly intimidating. And him and Harlow butt heads so often because she's like, hey, let me have choices. And he's like, no, I'm in charge. And then you kind of see him go through different dramatic experiences across the 3 books. And again, this changes his whole sense of self, his different capabilities. You see it like break him down and maybe build himself back up to side by the end of the series if that's what happens. And then we have Lee, who is Hunter's younger brother and is kind of sees himself as like the outcast of the family because he committed a crime that got him sent away. He's been released. He's done his time. He feels like the family screw up. And so you kind of see him being this playful, banterful, slightly reckless member of the crew who's really struggling to show he's worth something and feel like he belongs and put down that self-destructive tendency. And so you kind of see all these guys interact with each other in beautiful, beautiful healing ways in lots of many ways. And you also kind of have this background menace happening, the person who took Harlow captive as a child, being a menace to society, just becoming a bigger and bigger threat that almost seems more than human. And that the strain that puts on cybersecurity as a whole and the strain that puts on Harlow's mental health as she's like, holy crap, how am I ever going to escape this dude? And then the strain that puts on Harlow, Enzo, Theo, Hunter, and Lee's interactions, trying to keep each other safe and just butting heads over and over and over with very, very different strategies. Now, as far as Harlow's growth, I'm here for this series all the fucking way, but I could not forgive the team for how they treated Harlow when they have a decade minimum of experience dealing with people who've survived trauma, talking to people with patience and with compassion and putting detailed security measures in place, right? And yet they kept making mistakes with Harlow. They kept taking away her agency. They kept doing things on her behalf. They kept putting her in positions that essentially made her powerless, even though they had this decades long of experience dealing with trauma survivors and dealing with how to treat somebody with respect, with agency, honoring their ability, with a person-centered approach, because we see that in the other books. And I understand their past experience with getting in the way. I understand that it's always different when you're in personal circumstances versus professional circumstances, but I just couldn't forgive it because it kept happening in lots and lots of different scales. And bless Harlow for ever forgiving them and like breaking their balls for these decisions as she fucking should. But I couldn't forgive them because I was like, what are you doing? You are professionals who know how to treat traumatized people in ways that honor their need for control, that honor their fears, that create safe spaces, and yet you keep messing up with this person who's experienced immense amount of trauma. And I just couldn't move past it. So I found it really, really frustrating. I found the pacing a little bit slow, a little bit ebb and flowy with this series, which, you know what, I might not have minded if I enjoyed the guys in this book, but I just really didn't. I was so done with them. I was like, guys, you know better than this. What are you doing? I found it really frustrating. But the series is really, really good from especially if you're more of like a thriller reader or a crime true documentary kind of person. I feel like you really, really enjoy this series. Hollow is such a different version of strength, which I feel like we don't get to see that often, which I really enjoyed. So it's still a great series, but it just wasn't for me because I could not forgive that they kept messing up in this thing they had a decade of experience doing well with someone who needed it even more than anyone they'd met before. So that's me. Next we have... To start off, I needed a break from dark romance at this point, so I switched genres completely to a book that has formed me as a person and that I have gotten so many of my friends copies of. I've annotated it for different friends so many times. I'm actually working on annotating it for my partner at the moment because I see so much verse in it and it's adorable. So let me tell you about For Whom the Bell Tolls. It follows Lily and Baz mainly. Lily dies in the first chapter, and in the blurb we learn that Lily dies, and it follows her journey through the afterlife, reckoning with what she did with her life, reckoning with how she died, reckoning with who she is as a person and who she wants to be in the afterlife. It's so beautiful. It'd be so hard to summarize this book without giving spoilers, but I will do my very best. That's the setup for this book. And the afterlife is a space where whatever you believe about the afterlife is correct and is available to you, as long as that belief system was based around kindness and compassion. So what a beautiful world to live in, right? And throughout this book, we're dealing with so many difficult things. We're dealing with somebody dying from cancer and that kind of sense of mortality. We're dealing with reckoning with how you lived your life and whether you feel like you did enough. We're dealing with some religious trauma. We're dealing with past lives. And then all that is juxtaposed against Baz, who is a gentle giant of a man who leads armies in the afterlife, protecting the afterlife realm from other realms that want its power source for their own, and the weight of responsibility he carries to be responsible for so many lives and the safety of an entire realm, and his feelings around that being such a big part of him, but also valuing playfulness and connection in every single person in his life, and like finding beauty in any moment and that always being available, right? So there's this juxtaposition within his character of this endless amount of empathy and compassion against this ferocious, protective, very capable and strong-minded person who is in charge of an army, essentially. And so Lily and Baz connect, have a romance, and throughout the book, I'm not even explaining it well because I'm trying not to tell you what happens, but it's so beautiful that I want to tell you every moment. So throughout the book, every single character in this book is given compassion and empathy and is valued, and the correct weight is given to whatever situation is happening, and everybody is treated as valuable and strong and capable, regardless of what they've gone through, regardless of the decisions they make. And the inordinate amounts of empathy in this book is beyond beautiful. And I thoroughly wish the everyday world was set up in this way. I thoroughly wish more books lived in this kind of world where people were not seen as broken but strong, where people have endless amounts of empathy for other people and every decision is okay as long as it's based around kindness and strength, right? It's so inordinately healing. And there's a conversation between Lily and God, like the Christian God, that is so cathartic and so healing and so full of accountability, and it's beautiful. And then there are moments of like reckoning with different faiths and different belief systems and different versions of paradise. And throughout, Lily adopts a young girl who is heavily traumatized, and so you kind of deal with that through the book and like that feeling of like not wanting to get it wrong but just wanting to give Anna some amounts of love, and how do we give somebody space and also have those hard conversations that what they went through was cruel and unjust. Oh my goddess, this book does so much. Thank the goddess there is a second one coming out following Gary? Gas? Greg. Yes. Greg and a character that's introduced at the very end, Penelope, Greg and Penelope. And I'm so glad we're getting more from this world because, again, it has me in a chokehold. I have not really stopped reading it because I've been annotating it for friends, and it's so beautiful. And this is JC's debut novel. This is her first novel, and this is the beauty she gives to us. It's phenomenal. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. I will root for Lily for the rest of my days. Oh, yes, please. I'm so excited to reread it and keep annotating it for friends for you all as winter comes. So there's that. Next, I read the Not Even Bones trilogy. It will be here. And it was a wonderful little puzzling series. It was, again, such a gear change because we are following Nyla, who is basically a mortician. It's kind of set in this world where humans and beings with other abilities exist, kind of supernatural. And there's kind of these government institutions that have them on the endangered species list, which means they're protected, and also on the kill on sight list, which means they're not protected in any regard. And throughout this book, it reckons with who is deemed a threat and who is not, who makes those decisions, who benefits from those decisions, and what the hell is morality, and who decides who is a moral person and who is not, and are there villains, really? Or are we all just villains in somebody's story? So it follows Nyla, whose mum is a purveyor of the black market, who kills species for money, who are people with feelings and wishes and desires and all of these kind of things. And Nyla is essentially a captive to her mum, who's incredibly abusive. She kind of acts as a kind of mortician, as a dissection person, taking apart these beings, but she's able to kind of separate herself from it because she doesn't have a choice. She does very much enjoy that process. She finds it very calming and very soothing and very interesting, and she wants to become a researcher of anatomy who can kind of figure out how people work and what people do, but she wants to do it from a scientific basis of people donating their bodies and doing it from that kind of ethical standpoint. But unfortunately, she gets captured. And so the books become ongoing puzzles of her getting into more and more shit, essentially, with really incredibly dangerous people, having a really limited skill set because she's been shielded her whole life as a captive, basically dissecting bodies for her mother to sell. And so she really builds skills on the sly. Now, she has an ability that she can use to her advantage through the series, and she kind of gets to know her ability and comes to grips with who she is as a person. She befriends someone called Kaz, who gets vitality and youth and pleasure from hurting people because that's the species he is. So all the way through this book, we're reckoning with morality and what is actually needed for survival and what we draw pleasure from. And if we do enjoy people, what's the line? And do these lines even matter? In this kind of puzzling situation of them getting into more and more dire situations, them having to use their wits and their skills and their guile to get out of these situations. And so I adore the puzzle kind of setup of the 3 books, whilst also reckoning with morality throughout the situation and kind of getting to know more and more about other characters' motivations and how everything feeds into everything else. And is anybody actually on the side of empathy and healing? Is anybody? And so when I read this series, I read it back to back to back. I could not put it down. I started it on a train. I finished it in like a week. And I feel like I can't reread it because now I know the puzzles, I know how it ends. And so I don't think it would have that same like pace to me as it did when I first read it. And I'm still like absolutely torn with the ending. Absolutely torn with Nyla's decisions. Because does the ending mean that she learned nothing or that she learned enough to make the decision that she did? I'm so torn, and I really invite you to read the series and make your own conclusions because, it makes me question so much, and I love stories that make me do that, and I love the puzzling format. It's so deeply interesting, and I love trying to predict what's going to happen and being more and more confused with some things and predicting others, and it's so rewarding as a series to read, so enjoy and tell me what you think. Honestly, it was a wild ride. I had so much fun. I next reread Neil Gaiman's Coraline secondhand because who's supporting Neil Gaiman these days? He is not a safe person. And so I refuse. And so I bought this book secondhand because since I was a child, I had a vision of seeing time as a stack of plates stacked on top of each other, interconnected and touching, and all existing in one moment. And I thoroughly believe this vision came from Coraline, and that just inspired my concept of time. So I read Coraline and found it actually quite disturbing, to say it's a horror book for children. Deeply disturbing, but I think that maybe because I really struggle with body horror and there's that idea of like sewing buttons onto eyes. But for those of you who don't know, Coraline is a girl who's moved to a new house by her parents who are a bit lax with her as a child. They very much leave her to her own devices and shoo her away when she wants their attention. And it kind of follows that very like childhood feeling of like being in summer holidays and not knowing how to spend your time and just exploring and finding all these kind of ways to entertain yourself. Now, Coraline finds a cupboard under the stairs to another world, which looks like the world she comes from, but has an other mother in there that is tempting her over and over to stay. And you're not entirely sure of the other mother's motivations or what she wants from Coraline, but you're aware that maybe she's not safe. The stakes get higher and higher as Coraline gets in a little bit of dangerous situations, and things get more disturbing as you understand how the other mother's world works. And so there's an element of, is Coraline going to be safe? And Coraline realizing a bit of what she has at home and kind of reckoning that no one will understand her experiences because she's a child, and that like children's perspectives are dismissed so frequently. It's such a tragedy. But anyway, and so you kind of get this like whimsical children's horror story of Coraline just trying to entertain herself before school starts and finding herself in a world of wonder and disturbances and danger. So yeah, will she or will she not make it? Read it and decide. I did not find the scene though of time that I had a vision of when I was a child, so I have no idea where that came from, but it still holds up. But I reckon with time on a frequent basis because I just don't understand time. I have many questions about time. Anyway, next I read Babel. How to summarize Babel? I adore it. Babel is set in a world where the world runs on silver bars that are encoded with language. These bars enhance life in some way and keep trade routes going and really power the world, right? And these are all made in a translation institute called Babel, which has varying motivations. Babel follows Robin Smith, who is saved from an illness at the start of the book and taken to England for an English education. And so he is brought to Babel as a student, is torn between enjoying the learning of languages and the academia and the pursuit for knowledge and understanding language and how it interacts with life. He's torn between that world and understanding what the bars are doing to the world and the inequalities that they allow. Babel, it does so much. It teaches about origins of words. It teaches about what it means to live and breathe a language. It teaches how cultures interact with each other and change each other and dominate each other or remain regardless. It teaches about how language shapes the world. It shapes history, it shapes everyday interactions, it shapes understandings, it shapes so much, and it's everywhere. And I personally have always adored language and etymology. It's something I can research forever. So I really enjoy that throughout this book there are teaching moments where it changes narration to teach you a little bit about a word or teach you a little bit about history or teach you a bit about something that has been shared from the professors or in conversation or whatever it is. And it really shows so well the conflicts between imperialism and culture. It shows the conflicts between having multiple cultures within your mind. Of, in Robin's case, Robin grew up as a young boy in Canton, and then he is taken to England where he's given an English education. And so you see him grapple with that sense of identity of once being immersed in Cantonese and that culture and living and breathing it and it coming to mind so easily, to then being slowly transformed with more and more English vocabulary and culture and almost forgetting that link to heritage because he was taken at a young age. More and more things are revealed, and that creates more and more conflict within him of like loyalties between different cultures and the impact of his actions as a Babel student and him being a part of shaping this world and the new world and what he wants the world to become. And so there's so many beautiful parallels drawn and thoughts drawn and understandings of the world drawn. Babel shows so well how language can be inclusive and exclusive, sometimes in the same breath. How language can create barriers and cross them. How it's such a pivotal tool to opening and closing doors, to isolation and community. Oh, it does it so well. And it opened my eyes to experiences that I will likely never be able to understand, but I felt like I could, for a few sentences at least, understand even more deeply why creating spaces for inclusion and understanding and equality is even more important. Because you can break people's hearts with a sentence. You can break people's hearts by not listening, by erasing, and it's so important to create as much space as possible and as many bridges as possible and as much avenues for understanding as possible in ways that value people's lived experiences and what they add to a space. And Babel really shows the impact of not doing that so well and how it can be done in a sentence and in a choice. It shows all of the mechanisms of this so well and in such a understandable way that doesn't lecture, because we're learning it from Robin's journey from a Cantonese speaker to a translation student and the power of that. So, oh my goddess, it does so much. And I'm so excited to reread Babel in 5 years and be reminded of these lessons that are so, so important, of why it's important to listen, why it's important to value, why it's important to be accurate with people's meanings and intentions and open as many doors as possible. So Babel is a must read, especially for white people, especially for white people. But I really, really enjoyed it as someone who enjoys storytelling and languages. Lastly, in July, I read so much in July. I imagine it's because I was on the train a lot. Anyway, in July, the last book I read was rereading The Truths We Burn in the Hollow Boys series by Monty J. Now, this is one of my favorite Monty J books. It follows Rook and Sage. Sage is a daughter of a rich guy, leader of the town, who very much feels like she needs to put on this persona of a good girl who is a top student and the queen bee. She knows everybody's secrets and she can't be hurt because she does not let any of her secrets be known. Now, Rook is one of the Hollow Boys. He is a pyromaniac, is an outcast of the town because the town has outcast the Hollow Boys as basically evil guys who want to destroy things and are worth nothing. And so he is filled with rage also because of family dynamics in his own home where he is devalued and belittled and abused. And so there is the found family with the Hollow Boys, but really Rook struggles with that need to burn, that need to self-sabotage. Rook and Sage have a romance and then it goes awry. Their relationship turns to a love-hate one after tragedy strikes and Sage's sister is killed, and this shakes the town. It shakes the Hollow Boys. It deeply, deeply wounds Rook and Sage, the Hollow Boys, and Sage, the sister. And so Sage returns to the town after being sent away to a mental institution so that what she knows about what went down in that tragedy is devalued and she's seen as just another insane woman. So we finally follow. That is the setup for Rook and Sage's whirlwind romance of reconciling their past together and all the pain that was caused, of if Sage can even be trusted because she still has ties to her father who's part of that criminal syndicate that ruined the town. And also that kind of like forbidden romance of Rook being terrified to tell the boys that he still adores Sage and even being willing to forgive Sage in any way for what she did when he believes that, you know, the boys would see this as betrayal and they are so valued to him because they're such found family in this book. And again, Monty J writes so poetically and writes stories that are so true to the characters, and seeing Sage struggle with that need to be picture perfect publicly, but also just want to follow the arts and follow her own wishes and live her own life away from the control and corruption of the rich family that she's in debt to. And then Rook dealing with that urge to self-sabotage and hurt and ostracize everyone around him, not trust any kindness or love or happiness that he could possibly gain. Like seeing them both reckon with that and the ways it draws them closer together and pushes them further apart is so utterly beautiful. And then we also have the pacing, that background plot, which follows all of the Hollow Boys books, which are interconnected standalones that I think you do need to read in order for this plot to work. But that plot of the impact of this crime syndicate and how it's ripping these guys to pieces and ripping the town to pieces whilst also worsening the divide between the Hollow Boys and the town because they're being blamed. And it's just, there's so much going on. It's so beautifully intricate and also quite poetic and so raw at the same time. So I could not recommend the Hollow Boys series enough, and Monty J as an author, really. How are we for time? Quite long. So I'm going to close this here and let you know what I've read through August and September in the next video, and then we will be all caught up. I'm so excited to be up to recent reading with you guys. But you can see how we have been through so many different moods with these different authors, different stories. There's been ups and downs, and hopefully you found something that you want to try or something that's interested you that you might want to join me along for the ride. Thank you for being here all this time, and I will catch you in the next video. Sweet reading.